Today is supposed to be the start of our honeymoon, right? Why did you tear up my passport? Just as we finished packing and were about to leave, my husband, in a seemingly crazy move, forcefully tore my passport. His smug face really annoyed me. Honestly, I never planned to go with him in the first place. My intention was to go with my mom. I sensed some tension before we got married, but I had no idea the complicated relationship between my husband and my mother-in-law was this deep. I've never heard of anyone's mother-in-law taking over their honeymoon, at least not in my circle. This unbelievable situation shocked and angered me. But most importantly, I felt really uncomfortable. I started questioning if I made a huge mistake choosing him as my partner. As he brought out scissors and began shredding the passport, I looked at my mother-in-law grinning from ear to ear and thought I needed to get away from here as fast as possible. Unexpectedly, I had the perfect evidence to expose these two. My name is Sarah. I'm 29 years old and have been working for 7 years. Recently, I got the proposal I'd always dreamed of from my boyfriend of 4 years. And now I'm in the middle of planning our wedding and honeymoon. I met my husband after I started working. I've always been the low-key type, and though I had my first boyfriend in college, it seemed he lost interest in the quiet and not-so-exciting me, and we drifted apart. Years passed without me dating anyone seriously until I started working. I never imagined that out of all my colleagues, I'd be one of the first to get married. My husband was a senior at my company when I was a newbie, and he always supported me whenever I struggled with unfamiliar tasks at work. The only guy I dated in the past was a classmate, but there's something about someone 5 years older. I found my husband dependable and trustworthy. When he asked me out on our first date, I was over the moon. I still cherish the dolphin figurine we bought during our first date at the aquarium. When he said he wanted to date with marriage in mind, I felt like I was on cloud nine. We went on many dates, and he proposed to me at the same aquarium where we had our first date. Can I really be this happy? That night, I was so thrilled that I couldn't sleep, and I still remember that feeling. With my head still in the clouds, we quickly decided to visit his parents' home the following week. However, it was during this time that I began to feel uneasy about the idea of getting married. My father-in-law was very kind, but my mother-in-law seemed to disapprove of me. Hearing her say, "You could have married someone more outstanding than this plain girl," at our first meeting filled me with doubt and anxiety about our future life together. But I told myself that pre-wedding jitters are normal, right? So, I pretended that everything was fine and continued with the wedding preparations. One day, while discussing our life after marriage, both my husband and his mother assumed I would be quitting my job. Although I once admired the idea of quitting work after getting married, it didn't seem like an option for me at this point. Looking back, I realized that my ongoing anxieties about marriage stopped me from considering leaving the place where I felt most secure, my job. Despite dodging persistent suggestions from my mother-in-law to quit, I decided to continue working at the same company alongside my husband. During our wedding preparations, we disagreed on the timing of our official marriage registration. He wanted to formalize things sooner, and in the end, we decided to respect his wishes and registered shortly after. The procedure felt mundane, but realizing that we were now officially married brought me immense happiness. We initially discussed having a small, intimate wedding, but it seems my husband mentioned this to his mother, and she called the next day. "You know, Edward's wedding, and you're talking about having a small, intimate ceremony. Please don't just say whatever you want. The wedding needs to be grand. I'll make sure it's fitting for Edward. By the way, please keep your guest list minimal, just your parents and close friends. Your friends are probably just as dull, right? They'd make the wedding feel so gloomy and ruin everything." I found myself bombarded with opinions about the venue and the guest list. It was infuriating that she felt she had the right to dictate so much. Despite having a lot to say, I convinced myself that maybe this is just how weddings go and decided to invite only my parents and close friends, as my mother-in-law wanted. However, my mother-in-law's interference didn't stop at the guest list. She had opinions about the program, entertainment, decorations, and food. Following her suggestions would push us way over budget. Initially, Edward's family had agreed to cover half of the wedding costs, but somehow that changed, and now it was, weddings are for the bride, leaving us significantly over budget. I had to cover all the additional expenses she wanted, so the wedding turned into a lavish affair, quite the opposite of the simple ceremony I had envisioned. I tried to make some cost-saving changes without her knowledge, but she scolded me, claiming, "It looks cheap because you didn't do as I told you." I thought I would finally get some distance from her after the wedding, but my husband did something unimaginable. Despite my frustration with her interference in the wedding, and despite my desire to keep my distance from her, my husband insisted we live with her. Our new place, for which we had already signed a lease, was canceled without my knowledge. All my belongings intended for that place were redirected to my husband's family home. I was speechless, shocked by how everything had been decided without consulting me. I had handled all the wedding planning, and even when I warned Edward that meeting all of her requests would exceed our budget, he ignored me. The anxiety I had before the ceremony only intensified after our wedding. We had planned an overseas honeymoon to a dream destination I always wanted to visit. The idea of going there for our honeymoon felt surreal. However, my growing unease with Edward, who was acting suspicious, and the prospect of living with my mother-in-law upon our return dampened my spirits. Despite our wedding preparations, Edward wasn't cooperative about the honeymoon planning. Strangely, he took charge of booking the flights and hotels. I assumed he had chosen a romantic hotel for our honeymoon stay, and was excited as usual. Even though I had to cover all the expenses, the pre-wedding excitement made me grateful that Edward was contributing, even if just a little. Little did I know that this was a foreshadowing of a shocking event. The wedding ended, and amidst the chaos, our honeymoon day arrived. Despite lingering feelings about the wedding and the upcoming cohabitation, I was determined to shift gears and enjoy the trip with the man I loved. As I woke up in the middle of the night to get ready for our flight, Edward dropped a bombshell. With an air of casualness, he said, "Sarah, I'm going to go with my mom," just as I was double-checking our luggage. I was shocked and couldn't grasp what he had just said. "What are you talking about? It's our honeymoon, not just any trip. Why would your mother be joining us? Plus, we've only paid for 2 flight tickets and a hotel." Visibly shaken, I tried to make sense of his reasoning when Edward hit me with another surprise. "I never mentioned going on this trip with you, did I? Don't be ridiculous. I'm going with my mom. A trip with her takes precedence over a honeymoon. It's a gratitude trip for all she's done for me. You stay here and prepare the house by cleaning every nook and cranny." With that, Edward forcibly tore apart my passport that I had entrusted to him. I was in disbelief, unable to say a word, just witnessing my passport being destroyed. At that moment, my fully made-up mother-in-law barged into our room without knocking. "Edward, are you ready?" Seeing her, Edward's face lit up. "Yeah, we're good. Finally, we can go on this trip without any interruptions." They both shared a gleeful laugh, leaving me utterly repulsed. I realized I was about to marry an absolute nightmare. While I have been contemplating how to get along with my mother-in-law in our upcoming married life, this exceeded my wildest thoughts. I understand now the kind of people you two are. I couldn't help but speak out, but my words seemed like nothing more than sour grapes to them as they laughed heartily and left together. I had been happy that Edward was helping a bit with our honeymoon, but it turned out he was preparing to go with his mother. He had taken charge of the flight and hotel bookings willingly because he was booking everything under his mother's name from the start, and he dumped all the costs on me. The betrayal from my husband was a heavy blow, but my anger overshadowed the sadness. The dreamy, intimate wedding I had always envisioned and the honeymoon, meant to be the best memory with the one I loved, were both once-in-a-lifetime events now ruined by my mother-in-law and my husband. Overwhelmed by my situation, I couldn't believe this was happening. Initially, I couldn't accept it, but soon after, I decided I needed to act fast and get a divorce. Interestingly, I had something that would be useful for the divorce. Initially, I started recording with the intent of preserving memories of the most significant events of my life, my wedding, and honeymoon. Since the wedding preparations, I had been recording audio, capturing various moments. What started as a pure desire to cherish our wedding memories gradually turned into documenting my mother-in-law's malicious actions and harassment. I often thought of quitting, assuming I'd probably never watch these recordings again, but it's ironic how useful they turned out to be. Just a few days ago, I had moved in and was still unpacking. Now, I began to repack my stuff. Ironically, I hadn't opened much, so packing was done in no time. I wondered if my husband and his mother were at the airport by now. The very thought filled me with indescribable anger, so I tried not to dwell on it. Despite only being there for a few days, I wanted to erase any trace of my presence in that house, so I cleaned thoroughly. While cleaning the living room, I stumbled upon something shocking. It was evidence that my husband was embezzling money from his company. Given his position in charge of company sales, he was reporting lower earnings to the company and pocketing the difference. And apparently, his mother was in on it too. She had meticulously noted the actual sales, the amount pocketed by my husband, and even listed all the luxury bags, clothes, and shoes he had bought for her with that money. It was a significant amount. Leaving such a diary in plain sight in the living room, I really couldn't fathom what they were thinking. Discovering my husband's misdeeds, I was horrified, realizing the gravity of the situation. For a moment, I wondered if working at the same company could somehow smooth things over. But then I thought, why should I help someone who ditched me for a honeymoon with his mother? I headed to the company with evidence of embezzlement. Though they were supposed to be on their honeymoon, having both taken paid leave, my colleagues were shocked to see the very person in the office. Everyone was asking, what happened? Weren't you on your honeymoon? No longer feeling the need to hide anything, I told them that my husband and my mother-in-law had gone on the honeymoon instead, that my passport was torn up, and that I had paid for the entire honeymoon. My colleagues, superiors, and boss were shocked and angry at my husband. I expressed my gratitude to my concerned colleagues and headed towards the executive area of the company. Unbeknownst to my colleagues, husband, and mother-in-law, one of the top executives in this company is my uncle. I intentionally kept this fact hidden to avoid any perception that I got the job through connections. I applied to the company without disclosing my relation to my uncle and earned the position based on my own merit. Since my uncle doesn't handle human resources, I reached out to him before the orientation and requested that he keep our relationship confidential at work. Despite his surprise, he praised my efforts and assured me that our interactions would be like any other executive and employee. My uncle, who doesn't have children of his own, has treated me with affection since I was a child. Until elementary school, my sisters and I went on several trips with just my uncle. During my childhood, I would sneakily ask my uncle to buy things for me, leading to scoldings from my parents. That's how much he adored me. Since joining the company, our work areas have been entirely separate, and after briefly exchanging smiles during the orientation, we haven't met. I knocked on my uncle's office, explained the situation to his secretary, and was granted entry. My uncle greeted me with a beaming smile, but quickly turned somber. "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" Seeing my dear uncle's familiar, kind face, I was overwhelmed with emotion and burst into tears. Through my sobs, I recounted everything that had happened, and he became visibly enraged. It was a side of him I had never seen before. Of course, I shared the details of my husband's embezzlement and handed over the evidence. My uncle pledged to convene a board meeting immediately to address my husband's actions. Then he asked, "What are you going to do today?" "Head back home." I nodded, and he said, "Well, before you do that, let's grab some good food. I'll drop you off at home afterward." Despite the incredible betrayal of having my honeymoon taken over by my mother-in-law, I felt genuinely grateful, knowing there were still warm-hearted people in my life who cared for me. A week later, when my husband and his mother returned from what was supposed to be our honeymoon, I received an immediate call. My husband was furious that I hadn't picked them up from the airport and hadn't cleaned the house as instructed. he ranted about my whereabouts. I already had a top-notch divorce lawyer recommended by my uncle and parents, and the process was in motion. Without giving my husband a chance to speak, I said, "You too sure are loud and annoying. I don't want to hear your voices anymore. Why would I pick up someone I'm going to divorce, and why would I follow your silly orders to clean?" He was momentarily speechless but soon resumed his ranting. "Do you think it's okay for you to say such things? I did you a favor by marrying you. If I divorce you, you'll never get remarried. My mom's furious too. If you come back now and prepare our meals, I might forgive you. We're tired of foreign food. Make some tasty traditional meals." He had never spoken to me like that before our supposed honeymoon. After revealing his scheme with the passport and going on a trip with his mother, his true colors had shown. It dawned on me that I had never truly seen him for who he was. I have been reflecting on this realization over the past few days. I've consulted a lawyer regarding our divorce. Could you please discuss related matters with them? A lawyer? What are you talking about? I'm not getting a divorce. I could hear his mother in the background shouting for him to hand her the phone, calling me names. Well, do what you please. By the way, I informed the company about your embezzlement. I think they'll be calling you in soon. Maybe you should get a lawyer too. Bye. I could sense his panic on the other end, but it wasn't my problem anymore. He kept calling, so I just blocked his number. My uncle was aware of our honeymoon dates, so right after our call, the company summoned my husband using the evidence I provided. They verified the information and confirmed the discrepancies in the payments. It turned out the amount my husband embezzled was enormous. In front of the company's executives, my husband desperately tried to defend himself. He fabricated a story claiming I was the real embezzler, and he had tried to stop me. At that point, my uncle couldn't hold back and shouted, "My niece would never do such a thing. We've confirmed that you and your mother committed the embezzlement. You're lucky we haven't involved the police yet." Realizing the jig was up and that I was related to senior management, my husband looked as if he had lost his soul. That day, I went to the company to return the wedding gifts to my colleagues since our marriage had ended so soon after the wedding. Everyone refused, saying they had given them as a token of their blessings. While I was surrounded by this warmth, my ridiculous husband approached. "Why didn't you tell me you were related to the top brass?" "I'm sorry, really. Can we start over?" "Can you ask your uncle to keep me in the company and make the embezzlement go away?" Disgusted, I replied. "Do you even understand what you're saying? Are you okay in the head? Divorce is the only option now. Reflect on your actions and face the consequences." Having said that, I pushed him away, but he must not have had anywhere else to turn. He clung on desperately. Watching this, my colleagues called security, who dragged him away. He was fired immediately. Regarding the embezzlement, it seems the company is seeking damages from my husband. After finding out about the whole situation, my mother-in-law repeatedly tried to contact my family. However, once she consulted my sensible father-in-law, the calls stopped. I had always wondered why my sensible father-in-law had even allowed our honeymoon in the first place. But when he later came to apologize, admitting his mistake, I understood. After hearing his side, he had believed my mother-in-law was going on a domestic trip with her friends. He was looking forward to a week without my nagging mother-in-law, who was always badgering him about shopping and wanting to dine out, thinking it would be like a little slice of heaven. Then I came home. After hearing about the ridiculous actions of those two, my father-in-law agreed I should return to my parents' home and even helped me pack. At the time, our emotions were high, and without discussing much else, I just went back to my family home. Knowing how genuine, kind, and rational my father-in-law is, I'm sure he would have stopped all this if he had known. He was the only reasonable person I could trust in that house. Although I was the victim, the thought that my honeymoon had been hijacked by my mother-in-law was incredibly embarrassing. I contemplated resigning from my job, and my parents suggested taking a break from work for a while. However, my uncle, considering that work might serve as a distraction, discussed it with the CEO. They arranged for me to be transferred to a branch office. The divorce process with my husband went surprisingly smoothly, thanks to an excellent lawyer. Later, I discovered my father-in-law's involvement. When planning our wedding and discussing expenses, it turned out my husband had almost no savings. My in-laws, an average working-class family with my mother-in-law's wasteful spending habits, had minimal savings, as my father-in-law ruefully mentioned. Considering the short duration of our marriage, the alimony was substantial, and surprisingly, my father-in-law sold the family home to cover it. Their home was not in a city center, but in a close-knit community. On the day I was supposed to leave for our honeymoon, I returned to the family home, luggage in hand, and with neighborhood gossip in play. Rumors quickly spread. The stories grew exaggerated, making living in that area unbearable. Initially, my mother-in-law, always concerned about appearances, approved of our marriage because both my husband and I worked for prominent companies, a status symbol for her. Now, with rumors circulating due to her actions, she likely couldn't bear to live in that house. My father-in-law probably also felt responsible for covering the damages from my husband's embezzlement. While I hold nothing but disdain for both my husband and mother-in-law, I genuinely feel sorry for my father-in-law. After being fired and ordered to pay damages, coupled with my not returning as he hoped, my husband apparently suffered a mental breakdown, unable to work. He seems to be moping around in a small apartment he moved to. Seeing her beloved son so downcast, my mother-in-law also retreated, becoming reclusive. As my father-in-law told me, he was, in fact, fed up with my mother-in-law and considering divorce, not wanting to spend his later years with her. He asked if I could introduce him to the lawyer I had used. I immediately contacted my uncle, who got in touch with the lawyer. It might take some time, but I hope my father-in-law can live the life he wishes. Thanks to the intervention of the company's CEO and my uncle, I was transferred to a branch office where I'm surrounded by colleagues and superiors who have been incredibly supportive. I'm eternally grateful to my uncle. The only regret I have is missing out on the country we planned to visit for our honeymoon. Once things settle down, I hope to take a relaxed trip abroad.